This is the story of a real person who was a child when the Roman invasion of Britain happened and who died around AD 70. Her family lived in the Roman town of Baldock, where she'd been born. It was a prosperous market town, where farmers from nearby villages could bring their produce to sell, and also to buy manufactured goods. Some were made locally in the town itself, but others were traded across the whole of the Roman Empire. The townspeople were comfortably off and had a good standard of living. The town had lots of cemeteries, though not all of them were in use at the same time. Some graves contained people's skeletons, while others held the ashes that are left after a cremation, sometimes in a container or sometimes in a pile at the bottom of the pit. Some of the cemeteries were formal affairs with fences or hedges, paths, and memorial buildings. Others were just collections of graves in a corner of land or next to a roadside. During the building of the Clothall Common estate in Bulldog, from 1980 onwards, several of these cemeteries were discovered and excavated by archaeologists from Letchworth Museum. The oldest date from about 50 BC, and some continue to be used after AD 500. One of these cemeteries was excavated before Stane Street was built in 1989. It was a triangular cemetery that lay between two roads. It contained almost 100 graves dating from about 10 BC to AD 100. All but one of the burials consisted of skeletons. Most of them were laid on their backs in the grave, their heads at the northeastern end. A few were in more unusual positions, laid on their sides, with their knees bent or carefully arranged in very large graves. One grave contained the skeleton of a woman who had been laid to rest on her right side, with her left arm bent at the elbow and her hand in front of her. Her head lay at the south end. Her skeleton is in the case in front of you. Early on in excavating her grave, the tiny bones of a newborn baby became visible behind her right shoulder. This made the archaeologists think that both she and her baby might have died during childbirth, which happened to a lot of women before modern medicine was available. Then, in cleaning between her hips, the bones of a second baby were found. It was stuck inside the mother's birth canal, the wrong way round. This is known as a breech birth, and was obviously the reason that she had died. At this point, the archaeologists thought she was the mother of twins. It was only when the excavator cleaned around her left hip bone that the bones of a third baby were found, still inside the woman's body, so no one would have known that she was expecting triplets. She died when she was 40 years old. This was old for a Romano British woman to have children, as most became mothers when they were in their late teens. She was in good health and strong, although she had recently suffered an ankle sprain. But it was a problem with childbirth that caused her early death. All three babies were about a month premature, so she may have gone into labour unexpectedly. She certainly had no help from a doctor or midwife during the birth, as they had tools that would have helped her and probably saved her life. A few years later, a man in his 50s or 60s was buried across the top, his head resting above her outstretched hand. Was he her husband and the father of the babies? Her sad death is the first recorded case of triplets from anywhere in the world, and we only know about them because all four died at the same time. Her reconstructed face is the first time that we've been able to see what an ancient inhabitant of Baldock looked like. This is one of those cases where archaeology brings us into the stories of everyday life and death in the past.